How much do we fail to inquire into through sheer thoughtlessness, or an inquiry into the failure to plumb or mark the depth of the Mississippi River with respect to the question of Christ Logos as championed at a fairly low level, simply a level of understanding, but not a level of originary grasping of the dogma of Bishop Barron, who takes the view that Satan in the pit with the other slimy beasts is nonetheless in some way raging towards the good, Christ Logos means, in this sense, the word, which is a causal principle, because through talking about things we can set ourselves to do things. A word which is determinative of our physis or our activity, is identified with the God of the good, such that through discussion we can bring before us this sense of being ousia, the thing in discussion, especially by Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, but also by Plato, ousia, the base thing, not the jacket that someone's wearing, the blue jacket they're wearing, but the person themselves. This ousia, which is in the core of the thinking of the tradition, becomes the ousia or being in Heidegger's saying, language is the house of being. Parenthetically, I add that the historical rise in the consciousness of the problems of language, say, with Ernest Renan's piece where he says, what is the state? And part of what he's saying is that language is what allows the people within the state to communicate, and therefore to be democratic, therefore to say what's happening here and what should we do, and to hold a discussion. And if there's a break in language, then it's a difficulty in having a political community. And then many other questions which arose from the question of how essential is the question of language in this context of the problem of nations or nation states, or universality, or the Catholic thing, which becomes also in one extreme outshoot sort of libertarianism or Marxism, which I believe are substantially the same notion, except in practice the libertarians are always sort of Calvinist in bent, generally speaking, and then what they say is they constantly complain about everyone who wins. So if somebody wins, in the sense that Warren Buffett or his partner Munger, or whether it's Zuckerberg or Bill Gates, whenever somebody wins, they're accused of having cheated in some way, because they can't be viewed as the saint or as the high one, because that's what they would be in a Calvinist or Huguenot way of being. They would be the highest, they would almost be the Logos itself because of the level of their scope of their success. Therefore, they're accused of breaking the rule on antitrust or something of that nature, even though, straightforwardly speaking, all they did is they won, and they won big time, bigly, as Trump puts it. So in this same uh, way, we have this problem of the question, is the good tied then to the view of being as being as the house of logos? In other words, that through discussion we intervene into reality decisively. We distance ourselves from it in a way no other being does. Language, being able to make things into subject matter, into things named, into things understood, into something we can um, build generalizations around. Language as a special form of being becomes the only kind of being. Under that form of understanding, that being is always necessarily language being in some sense, then it becomes cogent to posit this notion that, as you will get in Leo Strauss multiple times, um, Strauss, who, though he is more the Athens or philosopher than he is Jerusalem or religious, although that's kind of a problem to say it that way because Jerusalem and Rome are two different places. But in any case, he's more on the side of Athens and was, along with Jacob Klein, uh, his close friend of his youth. They were both basically put down as atheists by those Zionists who were religious Zionists. But of course, later on, the powers of Israel more on the side of realpolitik and Netanyahu and the sort of almost Marxist claims to be a quote unquote proud member of the rabble and all this sort of semi-Yahuism that you get from Netanyahu. But Netanyahu is nonetheless a very shrewd and serious man. I don't deny that. But his form of Zionism, which was a theoretical problem in Strauss and Klein's time, which is the cultural Zionism, which is also the form Dostoevsky, the character staged by Dostoevsky in his novel and Possessed are discussing to some extent the Stravigan and Chatov discussion about whether the God simply becomes the God of the nation and subordinate to the nation. Cultural Zionism. Those issues were basically de facto, but also in his own understanding, Strauss was more on the side of philosophy than on the side of faith or piety or religion, although he always had that side as well. The side on philosophy is also the side where we get this view that later becomes the Thomistic view of the there's only good in the deprivation. So what Strauss says is in connection to the problem, which we see quite frequently, of these people that try to dismiss philosophy and principle. And the way they do it is by they sort of make their own views transparent rather than stating them as concepts or as general views about how government should be. So, for instance, in this sort of the Soros side of it, Strauss would say there's this view of the open society that the open society is a society where every individual is supposed to have their own views and be free to their own conscience, radical freedom of conscience, and even to act on that conscience. But what's always overlooked by these people is that this is a positive view. This is a view being laid down. It's a prescription. It's to be embodied in the laws. It's an absolutist view. It's just as absolutist as any other view on what the good society is. It's just that it has, as part of its components, this claim to be speaking of the individuals, each individual having their very variegated views. But that's just the content of one view, which again, there'd be one set of laws, there'd be one set of managers or governors of the country ruling according to those laws and so on. So it's as much one view as any other view of how society should be run, but it's being passed off as something different. So what Strauss wants to say, if you think this view is the best view, what you're really doing is saying it's the good view. You're saying it's better than the other views, or at least it's the Churchill thing, at least it's the least bad, however you want to phrase it, but you still think it's better than all the other views. It's the good. You're talking about what Plato would call the agathon, or the good view. Other people has different ideas about what the policy should be. They're also talking about the good view. Everything, so far as we're in the Logos, is either the good or the deprivation of the good, simply because we have these views. The open society, Soros is good, or he's not good, he's bad. But if he's bad, that means something else is de facto good, or the elimination of him is good, or however you want to see it. But so far as we're in the Logos, we're always this kind of being that is perpetually sort of incessantly coming upon the better, worse, good, bad. I mean, better, Strauss says, is just a comparative of good. Worse is just a comparatively bad. So we're always moving in this better, worse framework. So that's the claim of also of existentialism, so long as it remains naive of the question of language. It's only when we go outside the question of language that it would seem to make any sense to disavow this existential state that we're always saying something's better or worse. I just want to push Peterson into an orientation where he confronts the issue, which he seems to be evading. He seems to evade it by simply saying, "Oh, there are some people that they're so embittered and angry, resentful." Is one of his favorite conceptions. So resentful that they just want to do evil. So then he says evil must be a positive principle. But then the claim would be, from the point of view of the reasonable man, we can look at that action and we can see it was actually a failed attempt to reach the good, as it seemed to, let's say, a defective character. Because basically what we'd be saying is what they did, their action, say it was destruction of a monument or something, what they did, their action was not good. And if we know it's not good, we either have to say there's something defective in their rational principles, so they're acting irrationally, or we say, with the Bishop Barron example, that they're in their own way striving for the good in the conatus, or the striving towards the good. But it's in that, I just want to awaken those kind of nuanced channels in there. I think, so again, the Bishop Barron raises a lot of good points. I don't think necessarily because he's a bishop, and I think he would admit it, that doesn't mean he's has the highest and most great view of theological matters. There's we have the theological investigations and great books like that, which show the power of thought that the Catholic tradition has produced. That doesn't mean every baron or even every pope is at that level. I think among the great thinkers currently living is this theologian to the papal house, which is household, Giertych. His name is something like Wojciech Giertych. He would be one which I would encourage any thinker to attack and wrestle with, because that's where you see someone who is closer to living the teaching at a very high level, which is to say he comes into immediate possession of the teaching in his very being. um, to a higher extent. So he's more the true being of that teaching than are most of those who keep the fire alive only in some more moderate sense.